Welcome back to the channel, and in this episode we're going to be having a look at the TR6 differential. So now the darker nights and the colder weather's come, I've taken the opportunity to get the car in the garage, get it up on axle stands and get some of those jobs done that I've been putting off for a while. I've got some oil leaks around the seals on the differential, so what I'm going to do is get the differential off, take a look and see what I can fix myself.
This is the differential underneath the car. If we look a bit more closely, first of all you can see that it's covered in road grime. I'm not sure it's been off the car in the last 20 years. Looking more closely at the mounts, we've got differing washers mounting the rubbers. Not sure what's going on there or why that is. Closer inspection of the rubbers, I can start to see cracking, meaning that those are on their way out. Looking closer at the diff itself, where the axles leave the main body, I've got an oil leak on both sides where the axles are, where the two cases are joined together. That gasket looks to have given way over time, and again we've got oil drips coming from the bottom, and I've got evidence of oil from the front nose as well, where we've got the main seal where the prop shaft joins the front flange. So time to have a look at that as well.
First step then has been to get the car up in the air and get the differential off itself. I'm not going to be showing a video of how to get the differential off because I've already got it off, but what I can do is show you what's underneath and the steps that I took to get there. So this is where the differential lives, underneath the car. It is not too difficult to extract from underneath. I'm working with around 1.5 foot of 2 foot of space. First thing I had to do was undo the 4 bolts on each of the axles and move the axles out of the way, then 4 bolts on the prop shaft and move the prop shaft forward. I've taken the rear muffler off the exhaust to allow for the tubes here to be pushed over to one side, and then by undoing the 4 nuts on the end of the pivot pins here, the differential was able to be lowered down out of the way. So we've got the differential off the car, ready to start working on. So here is the differential unit off the car. A rather dirty beast. I suspect it's been sitting under there for 20 plus years without any attention at all. And the first thing I noticed is the little air bleed valve at the top here is surrounded by crud. I had to pop this loose, so that's telling me that that might have been blocked, and as a result the pressure that's been building up inside may have been the cause of the oil being forced past the seals here. So first thing we're going to do before we even consider taking anything apart to have a look at the seals is to clean this up. So having the differential off the car also gives me the opportunity to inspect and replace the rubber mounts as well. So let's have a look at what condition they're in. Looking at the rubbers for the differential, you can see I've got cracks here on mine, and generally these have seen some action. I know they've been on the car for probably around 20 years. So I'm going to take the opportunity to replace all of these, clean up all the washers, put new washers and bolts and nuts on all of the mounting gear. I've decided not to go for polyurethane bushes, preferring to give the differential a little bit more maneuverability, a little bit more slack with the rubber. So I'm going to be replacing the differential worn out rubbers with replacement rubber stock. The diff's had a good clean, still needs a bit of tidying up, but certainly got rid of a lot of the grime. Indeed, the breather hole here was blocked, so that could be the cause of my oil leaks, but we're going to have a look. The scope of the work here is to take the differential apart, replace the gasket. I'm going to have a go at these and see if I can get these seals off to replace the axle seals, replace the nose seal here. While it's apart, I'm going to put a drain hole in the bottom of the differential, clean it up, give it a coat of paint, replace the mounting rubbers, and then we'll get it back on the car. I'm not proposing to take the differential apart, one because I certainly have no expertise in that area, but also there's nothing wrong with it. It runs well, so I don't see the need to take it apart. So first thing to do then is let's see if we can get the case off, the axles off and the front nose off, ready to start doing some work. So we've got the diff mounted in the vise now vertically. What I'm going to do is mark up the nut so I know exactly where the nut goes on, so I can put it back to its original place when we've replaced the seal. I'm going to mark up the flange so I know exactly which spigot that's gone on, so I can put it back together again in exactly the same way that I've taken it apart. Hopefully that will ensure that the preload is pretty much where it needs to be and shouldn't give me too much trouble after the rebuild. So let's crack on with that. With my flange lined up here, it actually slips quite nicely over the shaft. So I'm going to be able to remove this flange really easily. We've got that aligned so I know exactly which thread it went back into. So if I lift this off and clear that out, oh, just lost a washer, get that back. I can inspect the seal surfaces here for any pitting or damage. First inspection they look pretty good, so we can concentrate on replacing the seal on this part of the job, I think. Next up, 4 bolts, and I can remove this mounting frame here and get that cleaned up and painted. So I've got my replacement seal here. That's the right one, that's going to fit well. Next thing I need to do is get this out. Looking at this, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. It'll be quite tightly fitted. So I'm going to use a trick that I saw on YouTube. So I'm going to try that out using a screw, drilling a hole and using the screw to pull it out and see if that works. So with the opening to the differential cleaned up, I'm now going to fit my new seal, making sure that we get the lip the right way round so it keeps the oil inside the differential. So now temporarily, while we look at the rest of the differential, I'm going to refit my flange, loosely tighten my nuts, and then we can have a look at the other side. So to get the back of differential casing off, we've got 8 half-inch screws to undo, and then it should just come away. I've actually got 1 screw missing here, so I'm going to have to replace that on the rebuild. But we'll get this cap off, this is the cover off, and then we can begin to clean it up inside and get this cover cleaned as well. The good news is, looking at the outer case, the oil seems to be okay, doesn't seem to be any bad contamination, nothing to worry about here, so we can just clean this up, give it a coat of paint and get it ready to refit.
Next up then, I'm going to see if I can loosen these nuts on the top here and then extract both of the axles from the differential with the view to seeing if I can get this flange off to replace the seals that are underneath. So next up, I'm going to try and pull this flange off using a puller. This is a real long shot. Looking at the forums, this is a complete nightmare. Gives people a whole load of pain and suffering trying to get this flange off the kind of chamfered axle in order to replace this seal. So the plan of attack is puller, then I'm going to try some threaded bar through here and pushing it against each other, and after that I might be tapping up my local engineering shop with a press to have a go at pressing it off. But let's try with a puller. You never know, might be lucky.
Okay, so we got a lot of tension in that now. I'm a little bit worried about just piling on the pressure, so what I'm going to do is apply a little bit of heat around here and see if the heat can make a difference to expand the metal on the outside of the shaft. Well, looks like this flange has defeated me, so I'm going to get it off and then we'll have another go at it using a different method.
Okay, so plan A didn't work, so we're on to plan B.
And the thinking here is quite straightforward. I put the two stub axles back to back and we've got some grade 8 bolts in between for pulling them down, and as I tighten these bolts the two axles will push against each other and in theory pull one of the flanges off. So we're going to give that a go and see if we can get one of the flanges off. Well, that method worked, and one of these has cracked. So I've done it for one. If I can apply the principle, I can do it for the other one. So this one is the one that's cracked. You can see now if I pull this apart, we've got a metal key in the shaft, so that is probably the thing that's causing it to bind the most. The bearing on this one is actually really good, so I'm not worried about replacing the bearing. And then here we have the seal carrier, and there we've got the seal for the differential. So what I can do is use a socket now to press that out, and then I can clean everything up ready for reassembly. Well, really pleased. Just got the other one to crack. And here's the setup I used. Similar to the last one, we've got the two flanges back to back, and what I've done in between is just put a solid kind of piece of metal, and then I turned a nut the other way round on the shaft so that the top flange was pushing down on the bottom flange. Small gap, and then as I've tightened the nuts it's just cracked and gone bang. So that saved me the hassle of having to farm it out to an engineering shop to do, and proof really that it's something that you can do at home. So really pleased with that. Here you can see what I used. I basically turned one of the nuts up the other way to give a wider surface to push on the thread. I used a small disc out of a stud extractor, put that on the top, and then put the other flange over the top and the bolts
and that's what pulled it apart. And as I've pulled that apart, there indeed lies my differential oil leak problem. This particular seal has disintegrated and fallen apart, so going to be replacing that one together with all the other seals. That together with clearing the vent should get me back to a oil-free differential. Excellent. One of the modifications I'm going to do while the differential is off is fit one of these, a drain plug to it. It doesn't currently have one fitted, but would enable me to change the diff oil easily in future. I found this off eBay. I think this actually goes on a Honda motorcycle. It's M12 thread, and it's got a magnet in it as well, so if there's any metal in the diff, it hopefully should stop that from going into the gears. In terms of position, the bottom of the TR6 diff, we've got this little lug here. It almost seems as if it was designed for the little drain plug here. So I'm going to linish a little bit of this metal back here with the grinder, and then drill a pilot hole through. So it's M12, so it needs a 10.2 pilot hole, and then with an M12 tap the hole, and then I've got my copper washer on here, and then that should seal against that to give me that drain plug in the future. Here you can see what I've done then to the boss. I've drilled 10mm, 10.2mm hole. I've used a flap wheel to grind away a little bit of the flange on the outside, and then I just need to tap this hole M12 for my drain plug to go into the bottom of the differential there. Next step then is to do some cleaning, get all these parts into the degreaser bath, clean them all up, give the rear casing a coat of paint, and then we'll be getting ready to start applying the seals and getting it back together again. All cleaned and painted and ready for assembly. The front bracket's all painted, the differential's been given a coat of paint. I've tapped M12, the drain plug hole. I'm going to start with the axles for rear assembly. Interesting point to note here is that the seal fits on the outside edge with the flat face flush to the housing, so when it sits on the differential it looks like this. So first step then is going to be to get the axles in, then assemble the housing, and then finally put the flange on, and then torque the nuts up to the right torque. So I'm just going to smear a tiny smear of gasket sealant. I'm using Loctite MR5922. I'm going to smear that around here to just get an oil seal around there. Just going to wipe that round. Yeah, 1/2 inch bolt, and the torque expectation on this is 16 to 18 foot-pounds. What I'm going to do is just smear some gear oil here around the shaft. Just to put that on. And what I'm using is 80 weight 90 GL4 gear oil. This is mineral based rather than synthetic. It's kind of well documented that the GL5 or synthetic oils can damage the yellow or the bronze components in the differential, the washers. So you must always use GL for oil. So the torque on this is 100 to 110 foot-pounds. So that's quite a bit of torque. I'm going to have to mount the differential up, so I'm going to get both of the axles assembled and then mount it on the vise in order to get that level of torque into these nuts. Well, if there's one thing we know, 100 foot-pounds is a lot of torque. With the stub axles torqued up, next thing to do is get the rear cover on. So I've got my gasket here. I'm going to smear some more of the Loctite 5922 onto the gasket to provide a good oil seal. I'm not prepared to trust just the gasket itself. So I'm going to put that onto the flange and then onto the cover as well to seal that. It's 1/2-inch bolts. There's 8 of them in total. Looking at the torque settings, it's 26 pounds-feet. So I'm going to torque those up and get this rear cover on. So again, using Loctite MR5922, I'm just going to put a smear around the rear cover before putting the rear cover on. Now we're ready to torque up to 26 foot-pounds. Now the rear cover's on, so that's nice and secure. Next thing to do then is to put my new drain plug into here. What I'm going to do is smear a tiny little bit of Loctite onto that. I don't want it coming loose, and then we'll screw that into place. Last thing to do then is go back to the front mounting bracket. To do that, I've got to take the nut off that I put on earlier, take the flange off. I can mount the bracket, tighten the screws to a torque of 26 pounds-feet. Then I can put the flange back on, and if you remember, what I've got to do is tighten this nut back to my markings here to get it in exactly the same place. Looking at the book, the torque is 90 to 100 pounds-feet, but I'm going to go to my mark, and if I happen to torque off before then what I'm going to do is leave it there. So let's get on with that. Okay, so we've got our diff back together, now to put some oil in it. The bleed screw is on the side here with a square connector on it to unscrew it. What I'm going to do is put 1.5 litres of oil into it, and then when it's mounted back on the car, I'm going to undo this and allow any excess to dribble out so that it finds its correct level, which is to the bottom of the screw hole here. A reminder again, I'm using gear oil, so 80 weight 90 GL4 mineral oil for the differential. Never had a problem with that. It's EP, so it's excessive pressure, it's good for differentials, and the GL4 rather than GL5 will mean it's good for all the bright metal that's in the differential, so it won't be wearing anything away. So this is what I'm going to be putting in. There then is our finished differential. We've got our new seals on the nose, new seals on both axles, cleaned the rear case up, new gasket, and underneath here you can see we now have a drain plug for future servicing. So really pleased with the outcome of that. Only job left to do then now is to put new rubber mounting rubbers on, and then it'll be all ready to get back on the car. I hope this has inspired you to have a go as well at changing the seals, a job that's often seen as quite difficult and people farm out to specialists, but I've proven to myself that that's something that you can actually do yourself in a garage with basic tools. So hopefully that's inspired you to have a go with your car. Until next time then, thanks for watching, thanks for commenting, thanks for subscribing. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you again on the next one.